Hello? Hi? Is this thing on? Oh, well, I guess it still works. It's been a while, hasn't it? Yeah, so the Westmarch Workshop is coming back out of retirement, and boy, do I have a treat for all of you workshoppers there at home that might still be tuning in. Yeah, obviously, to address the elephant in the room, yeah, I know the show has been on hiatus for quite some time, since obviously the beginning of this year. But hey, better late than never. I'm still around. Never intended to go this long without recording any episodes. Just things got jam-packed in there throughout the course of the year, but should hopefully be back to going through doing some recording. Some big shout out to Xanth and Rush, over at purediablo.com, that having me over and be a guest on their podcast. If you haven't been catching me, you can find me over there. It makes a big difference not having to go through and edit your own shows, when it's just like, hey, you want to record? Sure, I could show up for an hour and talk, and then have zero responsibilities from there. But yeah, it's time. Show's coming back. We're gonna start doing stuff. Obviously, there's so much to talk about, but for this particular episode, as you probably could already figure by like the social media or the YouTube title or however it is that you've come across this episode, that I was given a chance to play an early version of Diablo 4, thanks to Blizzard for going through and giving me that opportunity in order to go and check out the game. And this is me sharing my thoughts and feelings on that kind of Diablo 4 early look. So before we get into the thick and the thin of it, we are going to set some ground rules, set some expectations of what to expect here. First and foremost, this was a snippet of the game, like the very first act. It did have the story. We were able to go through and play that. It did cap out at level 25 and only features the first zone, the Fractured Peaks. So the amount of playtime was somewhat limited in that respect. So this isn't like some previous betas that of course have been talked about and stuff like that, like the in-game beta or anything like that. This is going to be my experiences within the small snippet of the game, and just what they had to go through and offer with that. Also, obviously, I'm a lore and story guy. A lot of the people that tune into my show are also lore and story people, and as a respect for that, there will be no spoilers in this particular review. I mean, it also was a requirement from Blizzard to not talk about any spoilers, but I probably am going to be a bit more conservative in how I discuss the story, just because I know a lot of those things are going to be important for the listeners out there. That, hey, it's the first new Diablo story that we've gotten since Diablo Immortal, and the first full fleshed out game that we've gotten since Diablo 3 and Reaper of Souls. So this is it. This is the real deal. This is a continuation of the story and all that. And so it's just going to be more my kind of higher level thoughts and feelings on this very early stages of the game, as it were. So again, just so that we were setting expectations, this has nothing to do with high-end play. It's just kind of like almost like just getting your feet wet with the mechanics and such within the game, and also no story spoilers or anything along those lines. So with that, let's go ahead and jump straight into it. Obviously, with the as far as gameplay goes, it plays phenomenally well. It's very crisp. The combat's fluid. Really enjoyed everything about it. You can definitely go through and tell as you're playing the game that it's pulling. The combat is definitely a lot closer to that in Diablo 3 than it is to, say, Diablo 2, and that everything is fluid. There's kind of almost like a rhythm and a pace to the combat, at least in these early stages of the game, where you're not going to have access to obscene attack speed and all these other crazy modifiers and such. Only being able to get up to level 25, wasn't able to unlock the Paragon boards, in order to go through mess around with that, and we weren't able to fully max out an actual build with our characters, because of the some of the other mechanics that exist within the game. You could get more than the 25 skill points. But it was a far cry from being able to max out what you would have as a skill build. That also, we were limited in what we could get as far as legendaries. I found one unique during all of my playthroughs. So there was limited amounts of legendaries and unique drops that we could have access to in order to go through and modify the builds. But beyond that, it did felt really good. The game itself also, I probably should have mentioned this earlier, was limited to just the druid. No druids and no necromancers. It was limited to just the sorceress, the rogue, and the barbarian. Those are the only 3 classes that were playable. I played through the whole story and messed around with quite a bit with the sorceress. I also played through the entire story and a little bit further than that with the rogue. And by the time that the beta had ended, I had only just started a barbarian and going through and playing with him. So I didn't have much of a chance to actually get any experience in with the barbarian. But between the rogue and the sorcerer, it really felt like the difference in pace of the combat with the different energy systems and such, as well as just being able to see a little bit of the class mechanics, because you were given access to having some early class quests that unlock certain features. One of those things being, with the rogue having combo points as a class mechanic. You do not start with that. That didn't even unlock until you were playing through the campaign, and then giving a quest to then go out and further to further unlock abilities. So you're still going through and you're putting in your skill points as you're messing around with the tree, and then you're also, as you progress through the campaign, getting more abilities throughout that. We had also seen this, even though we didn't get to play the Necromancer in the Necromancer kind of showcase preview. We had seen the Book of the Dead, where you get to customize your skeletons, golems, and stuff like that. It's similar to that type of mechanic. The sorceress, I believe we had seen in a previous developer talk that there was the enchanting system, and I had not gotten to a point with the sorceress. I only had access to one class quest, and it didn't open up enchanting for me as the sorceress. I don't know if I had to get up to level 25 or somewhere along those lines in order to actually unlock that class quest to get that going. Whereas with the rogue, I had got the combo points. With the sorceress, the class quest just kind of gave me some class specific items, but I didn't get to unlock that enchanting system, so I wasn't really able to mess around with that mechanic. And obviously I didn't play the barbarian long enough in order to really get a feel for the arsenal system and such. But with the sorceress, you could see it as you were going and picking the skills, that it would say that this is the skill effect, and then here is the enchantment effect. One of the ones that was interesting to me was the blizzard, which, if you enchanted the skill, made it so that way every 15 seconds you get a blizzard that forms around you for 4 seconds. So it's going to increase the uptime on your blizzard, by just that little bit, by having it go through and spawn for you periodically, if you're really kind of pursuing some sort of frost or blizzard or ice build. So you have a little bit of depth there. Well, as the rogue, you unlock combo points, and so your basic skills, which is all the skills have tags, modifiers, and so you can actually go through and you look at, when you're going through at it is broken up in the skill tree itself, but they all have tags on them, so you can go through and you can look and you can actually filter. There's mechanics in the skill tree itself that allow you to filter. So you can filter by basic and see what all of your basic skills are, and those all generate combo points whenever you use them. And it's not like World of Warcraft or something where you're building combo points on one particular enemy. You're just building them for yourself. So after you use 3 basic skills, you have 3 combo points, and that makes it so that way then your core skills will scale their damage or abilities, which again, the core abilities is just a tag that exists within the tree itself that you can look at. Obviously there's other things like frost and fire, certain damage types like poison or shadow, which will be tagged throughout all the skills. But there's a whole multitude of things like subcategories, such as like the sorceress also had conjuration as a conjuration as one of the tags, or defensive as one of the tags. The barbarian, from little I saw, there was like berserking was a tag in there. So there's a whole bunch of different little tweaks and knobs that exist in the game that could potentially be balance points, or things that further legendaries or maybe paragon boards or uniques and such could then take advantage of with modifying in some way, shape, or form. One of the legendaries that I had found was just basically, it was just like you had a bonus to your I believe it was like the core skill damage against frozen enemies, which just kind of like shows you that, oh, it's something that's going to push something like frozen orb, while also at the same time not buffing like the damage of blizzard. So it's things that you can kind of like target in on or home when you're kind of like figuring out how you want to min-max your build. Or on the developer side, it's additional this additional system of kind of like differentiators that you can use when you're going through and you're buffing certain skills or certain talents, while still making it very easy to players in order to see it, because it's not just the talent tree that's sitting there and you have to hover over everything. There's a little drop down box so you can go through and click, well, I want to build core frost skills on my sorceress, and you can just highlight those and it will show you everything on the talent tree. You can scroll back, look at the talent tree, and it shows you everything that's tagged for that. And so it gives you not just things such as frozen orb, which is a core frost skill, but things that might also buff core or frost skills further down the tree. There might be interactions that makes it so that way only core skills will have this effect, or maybe it will have something along the lines that things that proc off of just frost damage. So I did like the base that they're going through and starting off with there, even that early in the game, that you can kind of see the different levels or the different layers that they've gone through with the skill design in order to try and just have those levels of differentiation that allow you to really customize your build. You're not just going to be going through, obviously I'm sure that there'll be things that are out there that is just like, oh yeah, give me more frost damage, but there might be things that you could really go through and be pushing something like a conjuration frost build with your ice blades and things along those lines, versus a core frost build with frozen nova, or maybe even something that works particularly off of like your chill effects, that in order to go and have a higher chance at like freezing monsters. So it seems that there's at least a lot of potential for play there when you're going through and you're looking to like create some sort of badass build. There's a lot of things that you can look and tweak and just have the ability to customize. There's just, it's not just frostbolt, frost damage type thing. It's it's a little bit more in depth than say Diablo 2, where you just have like frost tree, and then you have like +3 to like sorcerer's skill, +3 to frost skills, and then like +3 to frozen orb. You could have things that are buffing your frost damage or your core damage or your frost, or give you bonus ranks to frost orb to increase its damage through that route, or even things that just increase damage for mana spenders and such. There's so many different levels that it can be tweaked You know, and who knows where it might go from there, because those tags are potentially mutable. You might even have the potentiality for changing those tags out or around with legendaries and such. It's a really cool system, and I like how much information that it communicates over to the player, and just allows me to just sit there and speculate and theory craft about, oh, what might they do with this, what might come from next. But going beyond just like the class mechanics and such, we got to experience like a little bit of what might be in the game itself. One of the big ones, of course, was we had access to a bunch of dungeons, because almost all of the Fractured Peaks was open to us. But there were some things such as strongholds that they've talked about a lot through various interviews and the development blogs and such. I could only find, I didn't explore every single nook and cranny of the zone, but I could only find one, even though the map said that there was 3 available. I don't know if that was just, for this testing purpose, and there's other ones that unlock later, or what have you. But we did have a stronghold that we could go through and experience, and that's cool because it like opens up, it opens up a little bit more of the world. There's some story and lore that's associated with the particular area, and it's just something that it's like I guess I should start back a little bit higher level, because there's an overarching system within the zone itself with the system called Renown. And one of the things that the Renown does is that as you complete anything, exploring the map, doing side quests, doing strongholds are one of the big ones, completing dungeons for the first time, as well as finding like little hidden altars to Lilith all throughout the zone, help build your renown. And when you hit specific points, it will unlock bonuses. Like the very first one is, it's gold experience in, but what really matters is, of course, a skill point. The second one is a potion charge, and then another skill point, and then finally Paragon points for the Paragon boards that I imagine would come later in the game. And those are actually account-wide unlocks. And so after I had played through the Rogue first, messing around with it for a little bit, when I went back and I restarted the game with my Sorceress, I had a free skill point to just start the game with, as well as an additional potion charge, because I unlocked the second level of Renown just playing through the story on the Rogue. And so the other characters I started, had these bonuses. And I'm sure that's something that will then exist, because that was like unique to the Fractured Peaks. It's going to be in every single zone that exists throughout the game, so that way every time that you create a new character, you're actually a little bit further ahead. Now, it's not quite the same like power level as it would be with Diablo 3 and the infinite Paragon points, where you can just go through and start off as a god. You're just starting off with a couple extra skill points and some extra potion charges. I don't know how the Paragon board unlocks would work. Like, does it give you Paragon points before you even have the Paragon board? Because like it wasn't even in like the UI to go through and mess around with. So I'm not sure how that functionality is going to end up working, but it is really cool because it rewards you for going through exploring, for messing around with the zone. Those altars of Lilith that I mentioned earlier are also something similar, that every one that you find gives you a small stat buff for all the characters on the realm. So when you go through and you find them, in addition to giving you a little bit of experience and a little bit of renown, it's like you go through and you find it, and it's like, hey, all of your characters now have 8 additional hit points, or hey, all of your characters now have 2 additional dexterity. And so you go through and find these, and then I think that there was like close to 30, it was like 28, 29 altars of Lilith that were hidden throughout just the Fractured Peaks. So that's actually, once you go through and you find those, that's quite a substantial amount of stats, that you could potentially unlock when you then go through and you multiply that throughout all the other zones that exist in the game. That if you manage to go through, you unlock all of the renown system, you find all of the altars of Lilith, you can start characters with, a pretty decent power boost. You still are going to need, you know, gear and such, but that could, you know, give you that little bit of a leg up, because we all know, you know, from going through leveling alts, from, I guess this is more for like a Diablo 2 perspective, that you can equip them out with a whole load of like really like just decked out min-max gear and such, but still things start off a bit on the slower side unless you're getting power level. But with this one, you know, you can potentially start off with what, you know, like 10 skill points, which is going to unlock your core skills. Is going to unlock, I think 10 is enough to also unlock like your defensive skills as well. So you're going to unlock a couple of tiers within the skill tree, and then you're just going to have a whole bunch of, you know, bonus HP, you know, in base stats as well. I could also see that being pretty useful, you know, for a hardcore character, so that way maybe the sting is a little bit less. That, you know, when you go through to create a new character, you got a little bit of a power boost there, so you can be maybe a little bit more reckless with your leveling. But it's also, you know, to not quite be entirely like the Paragon system like Diablo 3, it's finite. There's only so many shrines that exist out there. There's only so many renown unlocks that you can get from across all of the zones, that even though it might be like a really big power boost at level 1, probably isn't going to be, you know, as, you know, game altering in, say, you know, at level 50 or 70 or something along those lines. So, but still, hey, stat boosts are stat boosts, right? Every little bit helps. And so, you know, wanting to go through and complete those renowns gives you a reason to go and, you know, complete every single dungeon. I will again say, remember, this isn't, we weren't testing any type of in-game systems or anything like that, so the nightmare dungeons that had been previewed before we had no access to. It was just running the regular dungeons, but there was, of course, a reason to want to go and play in those dungeons, and that ties into the Occultist, which is kind of like the Enchantress from Diablo 3 that will allow you to re-roll stats, you know, on re-roll stats on your gear, things along those lines. The big thing that the Occultist did in the game was allow you to either extract or imbue legendary aspects, which would allow you to transfer legendary powers from one piece of gear to another. Now, you could take a, you know, like a lower level legendary, maybe you got lucky and you got like a legendary around like level 10 or level 15, and then you got it into your 20s and you found something that, hey, you know, I love using this weapon because it's got this like really powerful effect that's, you know, buffing like frozen orb, but the weapon is just like too low level for me to continue using. You can actually pull that power out and then put it into a higher level rare. It doesn't have to be legendary, so that way you can then take that rare with exactly the same stats as it has, and it just now gains that legendary property to it. But it also gives you the ability that as you complete these dungeons, you have what's referred to as a Codex of Power. And in that codex is baseline abilities of a whole bunch of items. I don't think that it was every single item in the game. Like, there were a lot, but there weren't like hundreds or anything along those lines, because you got to see, you know, you got to see them for all classes, not just the ones that you were playing. And you could go into a dungeon and it's like, oh, if you complete this dungeon, it unlocks a new Codex of Power page for a barbarian. Like, what does that mean to me? You know, playing a rogue or a sorceress doesn't really matter a lot, but hey, maybe I will play a barbarian one day. And so some of like the abilities would just be like, I think one of the ones I unlocked for the sorceress was like increases incinerate damage, and there's no stat value to it. It seemed as if it was always rolling at the minimum value that it could potentially do, because they're all very low. Because normally when you have like the legendaries, you could see that there was like a stat range on it or something, but on those aspects in the Codex of Power, they were limited. So you didn't really have access. You know, they were just basically, it's like, hey, here's something that you can use to unlock. You do all the dungeons in the game, you unlock the 100% on your Codex of Power, and so that way now if you're playing a whole new class you've never played before, you at least have aspects that you can go through and pull these powers and start upgrading some of your rare gear with these abilities to give you a little bit of a step up, a little bit of a power boost, or maybe it's just something that might be like a baseline component. You know, like I want to use incinerate, and so my build really needs like this incinerate power, and so I'm always just going to go back to the Codex of Power and take that until I find the actual, you know, legendary item itself that exists out in the world. But it's nice that it gives you an opportunity that you can you know, have these legendary affixes that you can at least use in some shape. I think it's cool because obviously, you know, there is the negative connotation that maybe that detracts from the item hunt a little bit, in that you can just always have access to like you know, this power. Like again, I'm not sure if it's all of them that exist within the game, because it looked as if it was far more limited and like it wasn't everything. But it, you know, maybe if I could see this as a system that maybe there's like some sort of particular legendary combination that comes out later on, and it's like integral in order to play that particular spec or something like that. Wouldn't it be better that even if they were like just the minimum rolls of being able to have those available every time that you rolled that class to unlock that particular type of build? And because you still have incentive to go out and find the item for, you know, the better you know, the better ability ranges and such, but maybe, you know, just having access to it, you know, just kind of like you know, it's something that doesn't really exist in Diablo 2 because, you know, everything in the itemization system in Diablo 2 just modifies the skills that you already had, except for obviously like Enigma and such. They give you cross-class skills, but you can even find like Staff's Teleportation in order to fill in from there. But in Diablo 3, I mean, that's like a really big thing where you can't play specs if you don't have the set. And so this one at least gives you some of those abilities to unlock it, because unlike Diablo 3 where it's just, you know, Impale does 100,000 times more damage, they're supposed to be modifiers. So you're supposed to kind of like pick your legendaries based on how they go through and they modify your skills with, you know, to give you whatever intended play style it is that you want. And I guess kind of like how Diablo Immortal's system is that instead of having the runes affect how your skill does, you equip different items, different legendaries in Diablo Immortal to affect or change the functionality of your skills in order to unlock new play styles, new abilities. And so having part of that, you know, kind of like built into the system in Diablo 4, where even if not everything is available at the beginning, say if there's just like some really popular builds or something but they require a couple of like esoteric items that are out there, that you can at least go and pull those powers from in order to at least get the build started, you know. And that's something that if you know, everything is available in that Codex of Power, then great, and if not, then maybe things can be added on if there's enough community feedback on it. Because we also did get a chance to sit down and talk with the developers, and you know, they were very focused on class balance. One of their one of their internal mottos was play your way, and that's one of the goals for the development team, that they want to have a vast multitude of different play styles available to everybody, and that you shouldn't feel penalized for wanting to play, you know, say fireball sorceress as opposed to like meteor sorceress or something. That there should be enough in there that could, you know, make it so that way you don't have to take like these super specific skill sets that exist like in Diablo 3, and that's going to be closer in respect to like the build system of Diablo 2, where you kind of can just make it's not that you can make anything work, like you still actually have to have like a cohesive build, but it's like if you're going to go through and you're going to, you know, equip a couple of legendaries to really focus in on, you know, a couple of specific skills, that should work. That should be viable, and that should allow you to play at the highest levels in the game. Might not be as efficient as, you know, finely crafted and finely honed, you know, in-game builds and such, but they did want to make it so that way you could feel that you could kind of like feel joy in going through and creating your own build and still being able to complete the same challenges as other people, you know, and maybe not as fast as some other people, but you can still at least go through and take on the content. That a lot of their focus is going to be on internal class balance, and specifically, so that way it's not so much that they want you know, Crusader, the Crusader, Necromancer, Witch Doctor, you know, in Diablo 3 are all capable of soloing a Greater Rift 150, and the other classes can't. And so we've got to buff those other classes so that way they can all get up to 150. It's more so that, hey, you know, this is a really cool, you know, combination of skills for like a lightning sorceress in Diablo 4 should be capable of completing, you know, the in-game content activities that are going to exist in Diablo 4, and that you should feel, you know, that the build is rewarded, and that you're able to clear your dungeons and things like that, you know, without issue, unless of course you're going through and, you know, you're engaging at a level of content where it should be difficult, you know, type thing. And so they want to make sure that, you know, lightning sorceress plays as well as a frost sorceress, as well as a, you know, a fire sorceress, and then fireball sorceress will play as good as a meteor sorceress, and so on and so forth. So that way the internal balance within the classes is going to be a more important aspect of going through and focusing that balance, as opposed to making sure that all of the classes, you know, are all, you know, synergistic in terms of like the levels that they can compete at. So it's kind of like, well, we'll get all of the classes there. That's a given. We want to make sure that all of the builds within the classes are going to be viable. So, you know, that was definitely you know, it was definitely it was a good thing to hear from the development team. That is, of course, a very tall order. They're the right things to say. They're the things that we want to hear. It, of course, is going to come down to their ability to do so once we actually have the full game in our hands, and we go and we break everything, because that's what players do, right? We get in there, we think of stuff that they never had dreamed of being possible, and just completely break the game and mechanics and such. But some of the other things that, like a question that I had asked, since there's this really big push for internal balance and playing your way, are, you know, would the player base be locked behind the seasonal balance changes? And they said no, they are fine with doing it at a faster cadence than seasons. If there's a build, you know, that is just not working out, obviously not just I'm gonna randomly, you know, assign skill points and randomly assign Paragon Tree or something like that, but if there's something that just is broken, whether it be because of a seasonal bonus, you know, or an item that dropped off the face of the earth or something, that if they're like, you know, I really want to play like Hydra or something like that, and it's just not working, they will intervene in the middle of a season in order to like buff particular specs, or maybe rein back particular specs that might be problematic and such, just so that way, you know, you don't feel like I only want to play a Frozen Orb build, and Frozen Orb sucks this season, so I'll see you in 3 months, you know, type thing. Which I probably should have opened with. They did confirm in the interview that Diablo 4 seasons are going to be 3 months long. So we're going to have 3-month seasons in Diablo 4, though they did not say when they would start. So we don't know how long after launch we are going to actually get the seasons, but, you know, I'm sure it's probably going to be something along the lines of, you know, Diablo 2 Resurrected, when the servers are capable of handling it, you know, type deal, when they're ready to go through and pull the trigger on that one. But you know, kind of like going back to the overall game systems and such, some of the other things that stood out to me is that the monster families were intriguing, and it actually changed the game. And as you're just going through and playing, when the families themselves, you started seeing multiple ones appear at the same time. Because like say like the vampire family, the lower level monsters, ghouls, is just they flood you with like 20 really weak, like these things are weaker than Fallen. They flood you like 20 at a time, but they're fast. They will close the entire distance of the screen like in the blink of an eye. So they're gonna go through and they're gonna mob you, which makes that even though their damage, you know, even from 20 of them isn't all that much, it kind of like, you know, surrounds you, blocks you in, you know, doesn't blocks off avenues of escaping and such. And then the bigger ones, such as like the vampire that we all know from old school Diablo players, like the spellcaster, which are called, I think they were like blood lords, will sit there and start peppering you with spells, which are now harder to dodge because you're surrounded and being move blocked. And then the kind of like the elite melee ones, the revenants, are absolutely nasty because they have a stun where they actually will stun you for a couple seconds and start draining your blood and healing themselves the same way. And now all of a sudden you like kind of like combine these things together, your movement's being blocked, so they hit you with the stun, they're draining your blood, and then now all of that tiny little chip damage is actually starting to get a little bit scary. But you then go through and you say like combine that with something like the skeletons, where the skeletons generally are a little bit tankier. You have a lot of them that are carrying shields, and so they start off with an actual shielded effect where you can't damage their life bar until you like kind of like break through their bubble. But they're slow. They hit a little bit harder, but they're easy to avoid. But they usually tend to have a lot more range, whether it's, you know, the skeleton archers with the crossbows, where they actually have those giant ballistas that can fire like from 2 screens away in order to hit you. But you know, because they're slow and there's not a lot of them, you can just kind of like dodge around, dodge their attacks and such like that. But then when you get attacked by both the vampires and the skeletons at the same time, that's when it begins to get a little bit more interesting, because now the ghouls are surrounding you, or the revenants are stunning you, and so now you're locked in place, or it's more difficult for you to get away or to move around to dodge those crossbow shots, to dodge those really damaging ballista shots. And so it kind of changes the way that you approach the combat when those families start appearing together. Obviously, it's very early in the game. We don't have access to like fully complete builds and a full legendary loadout and such, where this completely changed once you're at the level where you can just kind of like speed through the content and such. But just at least it felt good at the lower level. And then also the types of enemies themselves evolved, you know, where say Diablo 2, you'd have like the undead, you know, you'd have just like skeletons, and then you'd have the undying skeletons, and then you'd have like the burning dead as kind of like a high level skeleton. It actually matters. It's not just a name anymore, because there's a part where you fight burning skeletons, and there's these kind of like they're kind of like the elite melee skeletons. The ones that they're I think they were like, what was it, like corpse axes or corpse grinders, but they're dragging this gigantic axe behind them, and it has a big wind up time, but it does a bunch of damage and it knocks you back if you get hit by it. But when they become the burning dead, it doesn't just go through and slam for a bunch of damage. They start using the attack at range, because what it does is it actually shoots out a cone of fire from where they go through and they strike the ground. And so it was interesting seeing that change, where it's not just like the burning dead is a higher level form of skeleton, it actually changes like their attack profiles and such. Like those things actually became a little bit scarier, because now before I could just run away from them and they would never actually hit me, but now that they were like attacking me from like on the other side of the doorway where I'm not even paying attention to them yet, and they're hitting me from half a screen away with this flame attack, and I was like, oh, I have to change how I play. Or even like the Fallen, where you go through and you fight like kind of like you're up, the Fallen that you fight in like a dungeon, or your typical Fallen with throwing you fireballs, resurrecting things. But then the ones out in the ice fields and the Fractured Peaks, instead of throwing fireballs, they're throwing they're throwing ice bolts, and so they actually freeze you. Because in this game, the way that chill works is that once you reach 100% chill, you're frozen. And so all kind of like frost attacks have like a chill percentage. And, theirs was like relatively high. It only takes a couple of those frost bolts, and now all of a sudden you're moving at a snail's pace, or you're completely frozen for a couple seconds at the mercy of everything going through and swarming you. The Fallen were actually also a bit scarier than they have been in other renditions. Because when they go through, because everything obviously it's lower level of the game, but they weren't like the horde demon that they had been in previous ones. Like even like just like a couple of the little guys, they're fast and they hurt. They're stronger than the ghouls and such. And then you have got like the brutes and the champions that will also go through, run into the mix, and can do some pretty decent damage as well. The shamans, from just like the game development point of view, was really interesting, because there was also an audio cue. They don't just kind of like wave their hands and then some guy gets up. There's like a spell component to it. You hear them rattling their cane, and so you can hear it from off screen that there's a summoner nearby and they're resurrecting the dead Fallen. But you can see the corpse getting picked up. So if you're fast enough or have the capability to either like stagger them or stun them, some sort of crowd control, you can actually stop the spell and stop them from resurrecting them, which is important because they do seem to prioritize the bigger ones first. And so if you go through and you've killed the brutes, and you're trying to get to the shaman, they're going to be resurrecting those brutes as you see the brute's corpse go through and start being picked up by the spell. And so you feel rewarded in that aspect of, it's like, oh, I stopped them from doing it. It's not just that I killed you in between casts. I see you actually casting the spell, and I can do something about it. It's like that the information that is giving the player that it's like, oh, I've got to kill them in the next 2 seconds, otherwise they're going to pick somebody up. It's that I can see them picking them up, and I know I've stopped it from happening by crowd controlling you or killing the shaman before it happens. It's just little tiny things like that that make you feel as if you're like, okay, I'm making good decisions. I'm making great, gameplay decisions. I'm learning how the game functions, how everything works. And so just little tiny things like that, or like the little levels of detail that I can, just even at this level, I can see in the game, and I can't wait to experience what might go through and come later. It was really cool seeing like the diversification of how like the different families react, how they act, and then how they can coordinate together when they're going through and attacking you. But one of my most hated mob types in the game were the ghosts, because fittingly, as ghosts, they just appear. You'll be going through and you'll see ghosts, like as you're going through a dungeon, you'll open a door and you'll see ghosts on the other side of the room. As soon as you attack them, the rest of the room will spawn, generally right on top of you. And so it's like, there's really they're not like just there and hidden, and you can cast a spell in order to kill them before they quote unquote spawn. They don't even physically like warp in until you've attacked them. And so it's like there's no getting around them. They're always going to be there. They're always going to attack you. They're always going to get a hit in. And that, of course, is going to be, I'm sure, 100% frustrating as you get higher into the game, where it's just like, I'm always going to get hit, at least once. So if you have something that, makes it so that way, you take extra damage, from some ability, like say, like if there's any type of like Squirt's necklace or something like that, it's gonna mess with those particular types of builds that might exist. And so you actually have to like plan things out and be like really quick on your defenses. You have to tag something and then roll back or evade, or just to make sure that you keep whatever buffs up. So there's a lot of, I can see the level of engagement and like the player response, where it's not just an enemy with a different name, where a lot of that exists within all of the Diablo games, where it's just, it really doesn't matter. But maybe like, sure, you have gloams, in Diablo 2 with their lightning bolts, or you might have the goatmen in Diablo 3, where they're throwing doors at you with the size of the hitboxes of their spears and such, that become really annoying or problematic. And then nothing else like matters. These ones, like, everything has like kind of like mechanic to them. There's like a reason for them existing, and there's different ways that that you'll have to approach them as you go and you play through the game. It kind of like is a lot of like the higher level stuff as far as like game systems go. I want to go back and touch on a little bit from like the Q&A that I got to experience, going back to like the seasons and such, and that they acknowledge 4 seasons that were not just like say in Diablo 3, but a lot of other ARPGs, where you'll play for a bit and then you'll go elsewhere until the next season, and they're okay with that. They're fine with that. That's just the nature of games as a service, that you play through the new content, the new updates, and then you might find something else, but they want to give people a reason to continue playing throughout the entire season. They didn't quite say, what specifics were behind that. I imagine some of that will come to battle pass completion and things along those lines. But they want. They also, kind of like want to give some depth to the item finding system. So all legendaries have like a flat drop rate. So if you are a barbarian looking for a specific type of affix on legendary boots, it has the same percentage chance to drop as any other legendary affix on boots. So you're not like locked out of it. There's no Death's Web that you have to go and hunt down or anything along those lines. That you should have a relatively easy chance of going through, or not easy, but that you'll encounter it at some point. It's not like super rare or anything like that. And that you'll, the worst case scenario, you can go through and start extracting as you find them, as you're leveling. You can go through and extract those aspects to then put on other things. And so there's enough play within the affixes and such, which, it's only level 25. We didn't really get to see a lot of it, but there's a bunch of stuff from, chance to execute monsters on attack. There's plus bonuses to core damage, bonuses to basic skill damage, skill bonuses, like +1 to teleport, or +1 to poison trap, things along those lines. But there's also, there were like barrier potencies, resists. Obviously you have your strength, dex, which all have like various little mechanics, based. They all have like the same thing. Like strength always increases your armor, willpower always increases your overpower damage, but then depending upon what class that you play, strength increases a barbarian's damage, whereas intelligence increases like a sorceress's damage, so on and so forth. But there was a lot of different affixes and tweaks that existed there. So there at least is going to be like a lot of breadth and variety of the items that you can find, and probably what specific set of affixes that you want on your gear. So they said that there will be a certain kind of like depth to the item hunt, and that you'll want to go through and where you might find the legendary that completes your build, relatively early, then going through and getting the right slate of affixes on the item to then put the affix into will give you a little bit of time. But they did also say that at the highest difficulty levels in the game, that there are certain uniques that will unlock that are their kind of like their chase items, which uniques, like legendaries you can extract the powers from, but uniques you cannot. So uniques are unique. That's the item. You can't just pull that power and throw it on another one. If you want another unique helm, you have to find that unique helm. That was the only way that you're going to get that particular like power combo or a fix or anything like that. It only exists on that item. In order to get it better, you have to find that item again. And that there will be certain higher level uniques that are rarer drops, and that those are going to be kind of like chase items. I imagine since they have like this 3-month season in mind, that it's not going to be a Death's Web in terms of your chase, that you should at least have a chance at finding it within that 3-month period, but maybe not something that you're going to go through and run into in your first couple of weeks of gameplay. And that's fine. That's a great mechanic with which to do, which just works really well for Diablo 2, because those are things that people will go through, and it's like I'm trying to find that full socketed monarch, or I'm trying to find I'm looking for burrs, I'm looking for burrs and stuff like that, where you've got those chase items that you're trying to hunt down to complete your build. That gives you a little bit of it increases your seasonal play time a little bit more, that they just couldn't do in Diablo 3, because the only way to play was to have those items. If you didn't have that item, then you couldn't play the build, period. And so I will be interested in seeing what those particular items look like, what they could do. Is there like one for every class? Is one for every spec? Or are they things that are a bit more generic or universal? I don't know. I have no idea, but I'll be looking forward to going through and seeing them. And then also I don't know how the campaign play will work in seasons, but once you beat the campaign once, it unlocks like the adventure mode. It allows you to just go through and explore the world and play your characters however you want, whether you want to play through the story again or just go straight into the adventure mode and start leveling that way. I do also want to go through and point out the artwork. The overall art themes and such within the game were absolutely amazing. The scenes were beautiful, dark and dreary, where I was of the camp that I did enjoy the painterly look of Diablo 3. I think that it looked really well, and I enjoyed that art style. The vividness and the crispness of Diablo 4, it's beautiful. It really is, especially the way that they go and they play through things, that you're walking up to this fortress in the mountains, and as you're going and crossing you're crossing the bridge over into this fortress, the camera begins to pull back, so you can actually see like the full scope of like the battlements, the walls and such. And then as you go through the portcullis, it begins to like go through and come back in as you cross the drawbridge. And so it's just like there's a lot of like attention to detail that really allows you to just sit there and experience the awe and the wonder of it. Obviously it's like everyone is beaten and downtrodden, and you have people just like shuffling through the towns, dressed in rags. You've got people that are like like little tiny like cook fires and stuff like that. As you're going through like the snow and the tundra, you'll kick up like a skeleton or some armor that was just like left buried in the snow just as you're walking around, like little tiny things like that. Obviously it wouldn't be a Diablo game without, you know, blood sacrifices, demoning, summoning circles, and things along those lines. There's a lot of really cool visuals that existed within the game. And then the music definitely is taking some cues from Diablo 2. It's really trying to emulate a lot of that style from the earlier Diablo games. Whereas, you know, like I think it's not quite there, because in Diablo 1, Diablo 2, the music was part of the identity of the zones that you would play through. You know, whether you were entering into a cave or a desert or something like that. Now, obviously, it was only just like this one area of the game that we're able to go through and explore. But the music did have you go through. You walk out into like the wilderness for the first time, and you really get a feeling that, yeah, this is kind of like going and feeling like more like the Diablo 2 soundtrack and such, but it still feels a bit more background, where you could turn off the music and still experience the zone, whereas opposed to like walking out of the rogue camp and listening to Wilderness for the first time, and like you're just like you can hear that music in your head even if you have it turned off, like that type of empowerment. So the music is still really good, but I feel as if they could have just cranked it up just a little bit more, made it a bit more a part of like the experience of the zones and such, the dungeons and things like that. But it definitely it's a step up and getting closer to something that a lot of Diablo players have a lot of connection to, and that music, that ambiance that really helps fit like the zones and the tone of the game that you're going through and playing. It's really close. The sound design, though, across the board is phenomenal. You know, like I said, it does, like the new music does really fit you know, wherever you're going through, whether it's a dark and dreary dungeon or in, you know, the capital city for the area and such, or just, you know, there's at one point you're going through and you're like lost in the woods, and the wind blowing through the trees will kind of like reach like a crescendo, and then it's no longer just the wind, it's something breathing. You can hear like some giant monster out there in the darkness, like taking like these deep breaths, and then it kind of like turns back into like just the wind like rustling through the branches and such. So it's like it's got great mood music and such. I highly recommend anybody that's going to go through and play this game, please, first playthrough, play with the music on. It's worth it. It definitely is. You'll give yourself a treat on that one. And just, yeah, you know, you and I guess it's time to go through and talk a little bit about the story and like the themes, because like, again, no spoilers or anything like that, but it's got everything that you would want from a Diablo game, like in the first 10 minutes. You know, it's like demon summoning, blood rituals, decapitations, all that type of stuff. You know, not to mention then going in to the cutscenes, which look phenomenal. It's absolutely the cutscenes within the game are also really cool, because they use what was it? It's I'm trying to remember the name of it. I can't. It's not coming to mind. But it's like a technique where like the models and such have different versions, and so you've got kind of like a cinematic quality version of the model versus like the gameplay quality of the model. So there's cutscenes and such that involve your character, and then when it goes into like the close-up shots and such, like you're getting to look at like a higher fidelity copy of like the models and the characters and such, where, you know, it's like, so you actually get to like be a part of like some of those cutscenes, and that you're not just kind of like always like thrown off to the side or something along those lines. There, you get to have, you know, some of that impact and such. Now these aren't, you know, like the full quality cutscenes like the opening cinematic is. Like those, I'll probably should use that as kind of like a differentiation. That there's like there's the opening cinematic, and then there's all of the in-game cutscenes that you go through and experience, and nothing's at like that cinematic quality, but there's a lot that goes through and takes place in it. It was also something that came across within the game that I hadn't really thought about previously, but is something that is used a lot within the Diablo games. Like, because if you go back and you look at Diablo 2, there's the story as you play through the game, but then the narrative is given to you by Marius in the cutscenes in between the different acts, and he's telling you those things, you know, in past tense. He's past all of you know, the trials and tribulations of the travels with the Dark Wanderer and such, and he's going through and he's relating the story to Baal in the past tense. Well, as you're playing through the game, there's certain narrative points where the narrator, there is like a little bit of a narrator that exists within the game, that's going through and is highlighting and is like wrapping up the point of the story that you're in, and giving his thoughts and feedback about it, like in the past tense, like these events had already happened. So it makes me, you know, wonder, are we going to get kind of like, is there going to be some part later on in the game that's going to be a payoff of that type of narrative and such? You know, because obviously the narrator is talking to you. You know, it's almost as if he's like reading from a journal, similar to like the little interact, you know, little cutscenes in Diablo 3, where you, the player character, are kind of like reiterating like the story points that had just happened and what like their thoughts and motivations are. It's something similar to that, where the narrator, it's not your character, it's a third party, but they're going through and they're talking about these things, and it's just like, oh yeah, that is like a very Diablo 3 thing. You know, Diablo 3 did that. Whether it be like Tyrael going through and, you know, talking about certain things kind of like at the ends of the story, or your character going through and kind of like almost creating like a journal entry in between the different story points within the acts, and of course then the act summaries from Diablo 2 itself. So that was a continuation of something that I guess I hadn't really paid attention to so much, but then when it hit me and that first scene kind of had that back narration to you, and it's like, yeah, no, this fits. This is actually really Diablo's storytelling technique. Yeah, even just like this first act of the story, it hits all the right notes. It gets you into the thick of things. It establishes the reason, you know. In Diablo 1 and Diablo 2, why is your hero going through and hunting down Diablo? I like gold? Treasure? You know, type thing? You know, the story about Aiden going through and hunting down Diablo was added back with Diablo 3. And then Diablo 2, like, you're just some adventurer that's like, oh yeah, I heard that there was like, you know, in Diablo 1, you're like, oh yeah, there's treasure down there in the cathedral. That's where I'm going. And Diablo 2, it's like, I like adventure and money, so that's why I'm gonna go through and I end up saving the world. Diablo 3 kind of like takes a different turn. It's like, oh, you're the prophesized one that's gonna be, you know, the save all of humanity. In Diablo 4, you kind of like happen upon certain events, and then you're given a reason of why you are involved in the story and why Lilith's return matters to you. It's a very, very different narratively, why your character is connected. You're not starting off like some prophesized hero or anything like that. Your whole involvement in the entirety of the story is actually given to you as you play through kind of the opening the kind of tutorial level that exists within the game. And that to me, from a storytelling point of view, is actually really cool, because it actually is like you're not just jumping in and playing the game to play the game. You now actually there's a real connection and story hook there to get you into it, to give you a reason of why all these things are happening. That's more of a personal connection with everything than had really been explored in any of the previous Diablo titles. So that was a really nice, kind of like narrative change that I really enjoyed. But yeah, lots of people die. There's a lot of blood. There's a lot of there's a scene. I almost say like a scene. There's a boss fight towards the end of the act, which again, no spoilers, but if you're a Warhammer 40k fan, you're gonna lose your shit. I'm just gonna say that right now. You're gonna like do the DiCaprio point straight at the screen and be like, hey, I know that. It's great. It's really cool. There's a lot of things, and then there's tons of little tiny side dialogues and such as you're running through the towns. There's little tiny things you can interact with, people that you can talk to. Quests appear and pop up as you progress, through the game, that then add even more context and background, or even more questions that exist as you play through the game, where there's certain things, and the game starts hitting you with some really big names really quick. It's like there's some definitely there's some power players that are involved in the storyline, that fans of the games will obviously recognize, and then there's other ones that if you're a fan of the lore, that you're gonna sit there and geek out with, like, did they just name drop him like 10 minutes into the game? Like, what the fuck is going on? Like, it's like there's a bunch of like really big like wow moments. There's also, as a lore fan, there's a couple of sad moments and such that exist within it, and again, no spoilers or anything like that, but the pale cultist, the pale summoner, he's not really involved in the story. You get like a little bit of a glimpse, but he's like not really involved at all in the storyline at this part of the game, so you don't really find out anything about him or who he is, but you do at least see some information on who he's not. And yeah, if you're a long-time listener of the show, it's just I told you so. And if you're not and you don't know the background, then hey, no spoilers, right? You won't know. But yeah, that's obviously we're going through and we're passing an hour here for it. But thank you for listening to me go and rant. I do want to say that overall, I'm extremely happy. I loved going through and being able to play through the game. Thank you again to Blizzard for giving me that opportunity. I think what we've seen so far is an excellent foundation. The team is obviously very committed to this. When we had the chance to go through and talk with them with the Q&A in regards, to this little beta test, it is I can't tell you how many times that the development team brought up the term live service, continual support. So this is like, I just got to experience the beginning of the beginning. Launching the game is just the starting point. Never in all the years that I've covered, not just Diablo, but Blizzard games in general, I've done interviews with people from, I think, like every franchise besides Overwatch, at various BlizzCons and stuff like that. This is the first time that the development team has ever opened up and have talked about the future plans of the game past launch. Normally when you had something of this magnitude, it's just like, it's a great question, but we're focused on launch right now, or anything like that, where they're going through and fielding questions about season links, the future updates of the game and such. And so this it's great. where we're going through. Obviously, it's really hard to develop a game within a few years that is going to compete with a game that has had decades of content like Diablo 2, a decade of content like Diablo 3, continual updates such as Path of Exile. But I think the gameplay and the depth of the systems that they've previewed so far is at least going to get it up in that same range, and then just their commitment to going through doing seasons, story expansions, further story content, stuff like that, is really great. They're heavily committed. They're in this for the long run. They realize that it's not just a one and done, and then we're going to release the game, take a breather, and then we'll get an expansion out within a year or something like that. Like they're going full pedal to the metal on this one, and we're in for a treat. This is something that we're going to be seeing content for quite some time, and that this is going to be a living, breathing game, and launch is literally just the beginning. It's chapter 1 of the story, more or less, and we've got a lot of stuff coming. So again, I just want to say thank you for going through, listening to me here. I will hope to go through and do another episode before the end of the year, but definitely going into January, hopefully going to be getting into more regular content. You can find me at twitch.tv/BlizzPro. Obviously, the show did not have a live episode because of the embargo and all of that, of being able to go and get this information out. But you can also just follow the show at Twitter, at the WM Workshop, or at 9ballgamer on Twitter. You can email the show at westmarchworkshop@blizzpro.com. You can also, I'm going through doing a whole bunch of stuff. You can find me over on the Diablo podcast at Pure Diablo, where it is so much easier being a guest and not having to do the editing than it is having to go and manage your own. Thank you, Rush. Thank you, Xanth, on that one. I'm sure that we'll probably have some thoughts and some questions very soon after this launches over there, because they'll probably want to try and get some thoughts on my experiences and such. But until then, I will catch you all next time.